101.7 FM CHLY Question Authority.
The following contains mature subject matter and may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right. I have on the line right now Nicole Brasseur speaking to us from the hinterlands on the east side of this great country. Good afternoon, Nicole.
Good morning, Bob.
You got that one. Okay, you're, 3 hours, so you're around 2 o'clock or such.
That's right.
Okay, so you heard maybe some of the first hour of Altered Egos?
Yes, I have. Pretty interesting stuff. And it's kind of funny because yesterday, of course, I opened up my email and there's a discussion about the Law Society's misguided prosecution drives stern rebuke and adverse costs award. Now, when you were talking about, they might be throwing out 38 cases of attempted murder because of lack of funding. Well, if I read you this information here, you would be shocked to see where our money is going.
Can you kind of give us a synopsis of it?
Yeah, this was in Litigation Canada, and it's contributed by Dentons, and actually was published February 28, 2017. And it says, on January 20th, 2017, the Law Society Tribunal Appeal Division finally released its decision on the appeal of the costs award at LSUC versus Beth DeMerchant, and ordered the Law Society of Upper Canada, the professional regulator for lawyers in Ontario, to pay $1.3 million in costs to the two lawyers who were cleared of conflict of interest allegations in relation to their work for various Hollinger entities. The cost appeal itself was held on December 9, 2015. The wait exceeded a year due to the desire of the appeal panel to review the transcript of the 138-day-long hearing, given that the cost appeal was focused on the manner in which the hearing was conducted. This decision, in effect, both the Law Society's approach to professional misconduct hearings and the Law Society Tribunal's approach to costs. However, perhaps the most interesting part of the decision was the appeal panel's comments about prosecutorial discretion and proportionality in professional disciplinary proceedings. These comments should be reviewed by counsel appearing before and other professional disciplinary bodies in Ontario. So now they go on to the facts. The Law Society initiated an investigation into two lawyers in December 2005. In November 2008, after an investigation by Law Society staff, the Law Society's Proceedings Authorization Committee, which they call PAC, PAC, authorized the commencement of a conduct proceeding and hearing against the lawyers based on allegations of conflict of interest. The allegations asserting that the lawyers had acted in a conflict of interest contrary to the rules of professional conduct governing lawyers were dismissed against the lawyers after a hearing which spanned 138 days over 3 years and was unsuccessfully appealed by the Law Society in 2014. Under Rule 25-A1 of the Law Society's Hearing Division Rules of Practices and Procedure, the Law Society can be required to pay costs in conduct proceedings only where the proceeding was unwarranted and should not have been brought, or the Law Society caused costs to be incurred without reasonable cause, or to be wasted by undue delay, negligence, or other fault. Decision on cost at first instance. The panel at first instance awarded the total of $250,000 in costs to each of the lawyers. It held that while the proceeding was not unwarranted at the beginning, the proceeding became unwarranted after the lawyers' expert witnesses gave evidence that the lawyers were following standard practice along the corporate bar, and the Law Society failed to call expert evidence to contradict that evidence. The panel reasoned that 30% of the hearing time occurred after the point at which the hearing became unwarranted and, as a consequence, awarded each lawyer 30% of their costs on a partial indemnity basis. The panel at first instance did not analyze the Law Society's conduct under the second branch of the cost test on the basis that those factors were considered as part of an analysis leading to the finding that the proceeding became unwarranted. So anyways, long story short, they gave these lawyers $1.2 million.
Yes. Well, it's
money.
Yes. Well, our money.
our money. And, it just reminds me, I was listening to a commercial yesterday, on from Hydro One, and that the commercial had been paid by the government of Ontario. Now, that really burns me because, they need to start telling people, no, this was paid by the Canadian citizens. This lawsuit, $1.2 million, paid by the Canadian citizens.
Well, wasn't the Law Society taken to court? Wasn't that what you were just saying? That was the process?
Exactly.
So why wouldn't the Law Society cough up the money for that?
Well, no, because the Law Society works for us.
Oh, really? There you go. I never looked at it that way.
Well, yeah. And the thing is when you look at that, well, the Law Society has its own regulations and their insurance and stuff like that. But the thing is what we're paying is the 138 days of trial to begin with to bring, it costs us money to be able to pay judges for all this length of time and for all of the court costs. And then the Law Society does have insurance, but at the same time, that comes back to us in the long run with all these extra fees.
Gotcha.
So these lawyers who are being charged under, private law, this is, binding on our court system because of their incompetence, the incompetence of the Law Society Tribunal and all of these people who are, constantly using our funds to be able to do these things.
Well, when I heard that Toronto cops came to Vancouver to bust the cannabis culture on Hastings Street, that was over the top. Like, that's just crazy. That's just damn stupid crazy stuff when that starts.
Well, if you look at the RCMP, they're federal, so they can go nationwide.
Sure they can, but the fact that the Vancouver police wouldn't touch it, right? I mean, it's just like we're starting to see the schism, right? We've got this monolithic RCMP that's running feral and doing the dirty work for politicians and has been since the turn of the 19th century, back in 1918, 1919, 1920, when they beat up workers who were striking because they'd come back from World War I. There were no jobs. They were trying to get work, feed their families, whatnot. And the RCN, well, they were called the Canadian Mounted Police then, abused them, ran through them with horses, trampling them, and even shot a couple. And twirled their pistols on their fingers like they were cowboys from, well, TV had not quite yet come into vogue yet.
And that's always to try and show who's the boss,
exactly right? That. Because, like Camus said, the philosopher, poet, French, he was in North Africa, said you can always tell who controls you when you find out who you cannot be critical of. So
yeah, exactly.
So we're getting to the point where we can't call out cops now. Is that where this is going to be? Well, they're like gangs. Yeah. They're operating like gangs. And essentially these corporate structured political parties are gangs when you think about it. They are legal gangs.
The mafia.
They are. And they have the inside track, like you say. They hire the judges. They know the judges. They speak with judges. They have the inside track on all this stuff. And now we see it plain as day on the cannabis file because it's been kicked around for 50 years. And everybody in the political world is trying to make money for themselves and their friends through the legalization of cannabis. And that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, well, if you look at the KPMG court case going on right now, I mean, the judge had to recuse himself because it came out that he had been partying in another country with and hobnobbing with the top officials of KPMG.
That's right. And KPMG, just so the listeners in BC understand this clearly, KPMG gave the Site C the green light go-ahead. And for the accounting of BC Hydro and the rest of the crap that's come out of BC Hydro, almost identical to Hydro 1 in Ontario, and also what we're finding out with Newfoundland. Well,
KPMG gets most of the contracts, government contracts for, setting up the business plans and doing all the research for the government.
Since KPMG have been found out running that Isle of Man tax haven, I think it's time that the government and all the provincial governments stop hiring KPMG as part of the sanctions against them for their illegal activities. So let's go up to something right on the table, and that is Trudeau and the cannabis file. And what is Trudeau's position internationally on this thing? Do you have a position on that?
Well, the thing is, Trudeau really used that to politically advance himself, was that he was going to make cannabis legal. And then after his little trip to COP21, in France, then he comes back and he says, oh, well, now I can't legalize it because we are under international law now. That means that COP21 was a setup for over 170 countries to sign on to COP21, which means that now the United Nations, under, the control, and if you look at the head of the steering committee for Ban Ki-moon, this is the World Trade Organization, the World Bank Organization, all of these major corporations, the gentleman who is doing our ID40 chip ID cards for the world to have now, which at last count they had 1.7 billion made for the refugee problem that we have in the world, which is, something that they use to be able to enforce the ID40 that will be required by everybody worldwide, because they are going to be implementing this into our driver's license, our banking systems, to be able to say, well, we have to fix this for the refugees, so you have no choice, but you need to accept it as well. It's the same thing with the RFID chip in our driver's license. In Ontario, that came out in 2010. If you do not want a chip in your driver's license, they say, well, that's up to you. That's your decision, but you can't get a driver's license. So they're implementing stuff from the United Nations, and this is where Trudeau comes into this, because he works for the UNPAN, and the UN, and he's all for the UNPA, which is a global governance. It's a parliamentary assembly at the United Nations of all of the federal governments, or all of the governments worldwide, to sit at the UN, and then they're going to be ruling us, and then bringing in programs, like let's say in the UK right now, there was this movie, and I hope that everybody sees this. It's I, Daniel Blake, and it's about, how the system is geared to really come after people who are, people who have worked 30 years, get hurt, and then finally they have to claim UI, and then they have to dance through hoops, and if they're 5 minutes late, because their bus was late or whatever, they won't pay them for another 4 weeks, and then they have to make another appointment. And it's really horrendous as to what they're doing. And in the meantime, the people are starving. They're getting kicked out of their apartments, you name it.
I think what we're seeing in the UK, that's what you're really relating to on that, is what's coming everywhere, actually. They boast they boast in the UK that they have great social programs, but it's become glaringly, painfully clear that, as you're describing, in order to get to get access to those programs, you have to go through layers of bureaucracy that put up all kinds of speed bumps and hurdles and diversions, and so people aren't getting access to the programs they claim are so damn good. And if you look at the housing problem in the UK, it's exactly what we're seeing in British Columbia here right now.
Well, you're going to see that everywhere. And the thing is if you look at the UK, not to deviate from Trudeau, but at least it'll answer why Trudeau is saying these things, and why he won't be able to make any of the promises he's made, and neither will any prime minister or president or anybody in this globalized world we're presently living in. So if you're looking at the UK, the UI strategy and for the social welfare programs are all coming in from a company that is structuring the entire global system on how to deal with, how their workers will have to deal with people at the UI level or social services. And now, like in the UK, you have security guards in there, and as soon as a person is distressed or starts to raise their voice, right away they're kicked out of the office. And, that's why now they've got security guards everywhere, because they're going to be pushing the people to their limit.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, and that's all again. You got to bring in the NDAA within this. You got to bring in, the Bill C-51, idiots like Trudeau and his father, and the whole historical aspect of what Canada was supposed to be and what the oligarchy wanted it to be. and how they've manipulated the citizens of Canada for 150 years and made everybody totally blind to this aspect. So when you're looking at the international level, what's actually happening, like even in Canada, the BC, Ontario, all of the major provinces, the biggest provinces, and the communities are being led to go to one organization, again, in the United States, on how to do tax audits, how to do their fiscal year ends, and everybody's going to be using the same example worldwide. And this is what they're gearing for. Everybody is going to be stuck in the same system managed by one corporation around the world.
And if you look at our present governance system and electoral system, like how well is that working for us in a country that's claimed to be pretty well educated and have lots of resources? So if we can't manage our own governance because we've got this legacy of British colonial rule here, and we can't get past that because the mercenary politicians doublespeak, and frankly, they lie their faces off, and the one we've got now is probably the best example in quite a while, then we don't have a democracy of any sort. And this tax thing is going to set us up for a guaranteed annual income over which we then cannot add to. So we're stuck at whatever they decide to give us. Now, if these things look like they're a bit of a conspiracy outlook, then you want to pay attention to this next part, which is the Americans are setting up under Trump to rewrite their constitution using a backdoor approach where they only need I think 3/4 of all the states to sign on to it. If the states sign on to it at that level, the Constitution can be changed. So states...
Well, it's the same thing with us. We need 7 out of 10 provinces.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So if you're looking at that, and the reason why, like, we're walking a very fine line here. The United Nations was geared since the 1940s. They've been really gearing us up into a global governance scheme. And the United Nations, the reason why they destroyed and they ended the League of Nations for the United Nations was for global governance. And anybody who has an open mind and starts reading and does the research, if you look at, they've been doing research since the 1948 on universal income worldwide. How can they con people? And this is the carrot, dangling the carrot to the people. We're going to give you $1,300 a month or whatever, and we're going to give you this guaranteed income, and it'll help you. What they don't talk about is the fact that they're not going to be capping inflation. So, there's a group here that they've tried this in Canada before to see how this would help. And yeah, sure, it helped the people to survive a lot better and to get out there a little bit more. But in the end, all of a sudden, they ran out of money. So what are they going to say? So when I hear Ontario wanting to start universal income, I call bullshit on that because it's a ploy, it's the carrot, they're going to get people with greed and, especially people who are desperate right now, to jump on this and not even look at where it's coming from, why, and what's the ulterior motive. It's the same thing with the BRICS. They needed us to hate our governments, destroy our constitutions, so that we could all fall in line with global governance. And this is all being done meticulously, but holy crap, when you start reading into this, you see exactly what they're doing. You see the play-by-play beforehand. You know what's going to happen. Well, so people need to wake up here.
I agree. And recently, I read Joyce Nelson's book, Beyond Banksters. You want to read that one, people. That's a super good book. It's easy to read. It's fast-paced and written in lay terms, and she keeps bringing back the key players and the key issues so you can follow it easily because it's a very convoluted situation. But one of the things she states, she pulled out of the book called Trading with the Enemy, a book I've referred to here on Altered Egos quite often, and one I've acquired recently and will be reading parts of on air. The Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks, and it's privately owned, like all the privately owned central banks. The BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, was set up after World War I to work with the reparations to pay back and rebuild Europe well, be darned if the Bank of International Settlements funded Hitler during the Second World War. Like,
yeah, and if people, wrap their heads around this, Switzerland was one of the places that was protected, okay, and the BIF. So if you're looking at everybody, it's almost like they all agreed, okay, nobody touches this because now you can all hide your money here.
Yeah.
You can all hide your artifacts and your paintings, and nobody's going to touch this, and then we're just going to go at it.
yeah, yeah.
And the whole thing for wars, and people have to think about this. If you are a government or you are a crown or whatever, how do you get rid of useless eaters? You create wars and then have them kill each other and then have them starve to death. And this way you could get more traction and less people coming after you. So when you've got 7 billion people around this planet, well, now, we need to control this, and we need to we're going to promise them peace and world peace if we're all one big happy family under the United Nations. What people don't look at is who are the steering committees creating the global international deals, the corporate deals that are actually ruining our lives in our own country. And this is the politicians who allow all this to happen, and the politicians are the ones who are paid by these corporations to be able to fund everything they do. Now, everybody that's coming into the political party system, are they aware that in the United States, and this is documented, that everybody has to swear allegiance to Israel in order, before they can get their funding, to be able to start their campaigns.
So this is a party policy.
This is not a party policy. This is a whole government policy.
But a government's only a party that's been elected to power, right?
All the politicians, everybody in Congress, it doesn't matter who gets elected, if you want your funding to be able to launch your campaign, you will not get a dime until you have written a one paragraph that you have to swear allegiance to Israel. Now, don't ask yourself why they call Camp David Camp David. And if you look back at 1493 with the Doctrine of Discovery and who came up with Christopher Columbus on that boat, you'll see that it was a bunch of, I call them fake Jews. Because what they were, if you look at the Scions, not Zions, Scions, they were the elders of wealthy families from every country in the world who took over the Vatican back in 1493.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have a very, very potent project in front of you. The myfreedom2017.com website speaks a lot about that, and Democracy School on Facebook. You have also another page somewhere. What is it?
iAccuse.com.
iAccuse. Gosh, how could I not remember that one? iAccuse.com.
iAccuse is how we started the Indigenous and Civil Unified Sovereign Enactment, which is the Convention of Consent.
Gotcha.
That's the baby that started all of this. And it was because of all of the research that I've done. Like, I mean, the Jewish people, the, Muslims, Catholics, everybody is being pinned against each other. And the one thing that I want to stress, that I must remind everybody, is that once everybody remembers who they are as spirits, when we come here, it doesn't matter if you're a Volkswagen or a BMW or a Mercedes-Benz or a pickup truck. All we are spirits coming into bodies and leaving the bodies after death. So, we've got those Gnostic people out there that might not understand this, but unless you can see, you understand the spirit world and you've got that level of experience there, you do understand it. And we need to stop the racism. We need to stop the divide and conquer. And this is what they're using against everybody and trying to confuse everything. So we need to stop looking at the past and looking towards the future, because we can't change the past, but we sure as hell can make sure the future is better.
So what are the steps to a better future?
The steps to a better future is to realize that Canadian citizens are the employers of the government. The Canadian citizens do own the Bank of Canada. It is ours. I had a gentleman who questioned that because he says, well, why do we borrow money? No, the government of Canada borrows money from the Bank of Canada, which is our bank. So they borrow money from us to do what they need to do to take care of society as a whole and our infrastructure. So, and this is how they get around this, to be able to say that the government is not stealing money from the Bank of Canada or from Canadians. So they have to kind of make that a little bit at arm's length. And then they say that the head of the Bank of Canada and the board of directors are at arm's length from the government of Canada. And they answer to the parliamentarians and not really to the government. So the government has to borrow money from the Bank of Canada at, zero interest rate. And that's how it is. But the bottom line is Canadians own the government. The only reason why the government is allowed to dictate over us is because every time we vote for a political party, we give away our proxy to them. We give them the right to be able to rule over us and to have them make decisions for us. And this is where everybody in the world has gone wrong. This is how they've been able to manipulate everybody, is through the political party voting system, where in each community we should have our representatives without final decision-making authority. We should, if we're going to have over 300 people in Parliament, they should at least be representing their community and not be hogtied to some party that they have to toe a party line to, and then kiss I'm going to say it, kiss ass to every corporate entity that gives them thousands of dollars for their elections.
Well, we had a very interesting political thing here in Nanaimo just the last week where we voted on a question put forward by the city councillors whether people wanted an event center worth $80 million. That's its initial price tag down at the waterfront. And now, that process got geared up in only a couple, 3 months, and it went through smoothly, and the count was announced just hours or less after the vote. And so the people decided for themselves that, no, thank you, we don't really want that right now, and we have these other issues we'd like to look at. So you can see that this is a workable process, and that all the machinations of people's group politics can still be expressed through individuals if you get your majority with that individual, and not through a party construct. Like what we have now is all of our elected representatives are neutered when they go to Ottawa because of the party whip system, because they have to follow any of the dogma of the party, like you said with the states, and having to declare, well, this is even beyond party in the states by the sound of it, but that they support Israel. And in Canada, I bet it's not much different. We've all seen what happened when Netanyahu. That was not a very good situation. Go ahead.
No, we have proof of the politicians holding allegiance, swearing their allegiance to Israel. Even Trudeau did. Elizabeth May tried to run a little bit from it, but in the end she got caught. So, it all depends on what people want to do. Do people want a nanny and somebody to dictate to them and to rule over them and to bitch at? Or are they going to start, acting as the grown-ups that they should be and be responsible for what our politicians do? Because in the end, if we, it'd be nice to be able to see this politician say, okay, well, we're going to give you direct democracy and we swear we're going to give it to you. But in the end, what we've seen over all of the histories everywhere worldwide, that the parties who promise direct democracy to the citizens never do it. Why? Because once they're in there, God knows what happens, but it's almost like they have a gun to their heads and they can't do anything and they can't fulfill their promises. So they all end up being liars. And then the people, okay, well, now we got to wait another 4 years. How do you stop the revolving cycle? You sign the Citizens Convention of Consent. We do not need anybody. As Canadian citizens, we are the employers. We are the shareholders of the Crown Corporation of Canada. We are the Crown of Canada. And we need to be able to have a contract amongst ourselves, because we don't need to ask the politicians, or our government or the courts the right to lead ourselves, because nothing supersedes the will of the people in law. If 51% says one thing, and this is what they want, 51% is usually not enough. Like, we'd want a higher consensus. But in order to get this going, by law, we only require 51%. So let's go for it. 51% of the Canadian citizens signed the Citizens Convention of Consent. It's a legally binding contract between the citizens. It only comes into force once we've reached 51% of a province. And then we go province to province to province until we have the whole country, on board with this. Because it's the only way we're going to be able to get out of the clutches of the international corporations who are manipulating the United Nations and the people worldwide and having people in distress. When we own the Bank of Canada, we don't need to borrow money from ourselves. We are the money. We can print our own money. That's what the Bank of Canada was great for. And, in hindsight, Canada brought in global governance. If you look at Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he's actually a communist, not a liberal. You and I were going through this document the other day about his ties to Mao and all of these people. So actually the liberals are more of a communist party than anything else. So, people have to stop wanting a nanny, start being responsible, sign the Citizens Convention of Consent, because it's the only hope in hell, the only 100% guarantee that we can make change happen. We need to stop relying on everybody else and rely on ourselves.
Okay, so the iaccuse.com site has the Citizens Consent form?
Yes, and if you notice, I wrote an open letter to all Canadians abroad and to all countries. And this is about, saying that Canadians need governance reform, not electoral reform, because proportional representation or anything they do that involves a political party and their rights over us will never succeed at anything. And while I'm on this subject, in Canada, we are the employers. We even are the employer of the Queen. The Queen and the Governor General are only there to take direction from us, but only once we have 51% in agreement. So until we reach a 51% agreement of anything, we will never be able to get anything done. And this is why they can rule over us. This is why they can beat the people on the street, because 51% are not saying no. Everybody has, and they have to protect. In their eyes, the whole of Canada. The whole of Canada, majority is 51%. And this is what's required within corporate law under our Constituency Act, under our Financial Act, under our Crown Corporations Act, and all of the Corporations Act. So all of our governance is based under corporate governance. So you take that, and if you're trying to do anything on your own, you will get nowhere. If you try to do anything with less than 51%, you're not going to achieve it. I'm going to give you this little bit of information. In regards to taxation, legally, taxation is voluntary. That's the government has admitted to that. That's a known fact. Canada taxation is voluntary, but it's only voluntary. It was voluntary because of the wars, and the people agreed to pay taxes to try and get out of the slump that they were in, that everybody should fork out a little bit. So over 51% basically agreed, even though they never had a referendum on it, to taxation when we went to war. So after the war, they decide, okay, well, let's keep this going. The people did not rise up and say no. So because the people did not rise up and say no at 51%, they kept the taxation going. So if 51% of people said, okay, no more taxes, we can create our own money for our own infrastructures, the corporations who passed on their tax their tax accounts to the employees to pay instead, because what they did is the corporations passed that on to the employees. If the employees wanted a job, they had to agree to pay taxes, and for the company to remove that off of their paychecks.
Oh, really?
And send that into send that all to the government.
Okay, so now the Bank of Canada Act is, I think, 1938 or such. It was put in place to rebuild the country after the First War, well, after the Depression mostly. There was a contrived stock market crash in 29. That's well documented now. Various people pulled the money out just weeks, if not days, before the crash. These were well-informed people of the upper wealth class. And so the whole issue of the Bank of Canada was to rebuild the country. And so from 1938 until 1974, some 30 years, We built roads, hospitals, schools, and it was built on money from the Bank of Canada at almost zero interest, only the cost of printing the money, which is less than 1%. There was no interest rate charge on it, like commercial banks charge the federal government now. Last month or last year was $30 billion. There's a big infrastructure project in Canada as well as the States, and that Trudeau is going into private partnerships with public money. And this whole issue of the Bank of Canada is being quashed by the Trudeau government because he's in bed with the banks. The banks will kill us in the end. You know, here we have banks in Canada who are forcing their teller staff to push unnecessary financial vehicles on clients and put the clients at harm without telling the client they've done it, which is illegal in Canada. We're going to see a public inquiry. I'm pretty sure that's coming down on the banks. But here's the kicker. The banks aren't doing this to save their asses. They've got the highest rate of profits they've ever had right now, and they're pushing their teller staff to do this on us. They're out to crush us, people, and this has been the history of private banking from day one. This is the history of destroying people's personal assets in a cyclical manner in order to keep the wealth in the hands of a very, very small group of people. So
exactly.
we would not go bankrupt, as a lot of fearful politicians have thrown on the table before. We ran 30 years of building for public use and therefore not incurring interest on this money. And so we should go back to that and stop feeding these voracious banks and their destructive attitude to lending money. They will lend money for any purpose that makes money, including war. And this has to stop. We have to get a control of our government to do that. And this whole issue of IAccused.com and MyFreedom2017.com and Democracy School is about re-educating Canadians and other citizens of every country of the world that we are the ones with the power. And we've been bottled up in this party-structured, mercenary political game that now is reaching end stage, and we will not survive the next 50 years if we do not get a hold of our politicians as being our employees and doing what we direct them to do. It's not hard to have more plebiscites, more votes on political issues, economic issues when we have the internet, we have email, and people are well connected in communities, and they're well informed, not by corporate media, mind you, but once there's a need for that information, we'll find people put up their own websites in a local area like here, Nanaimo, or wherever a person resides, and the information necessary for grassroots, true democracy, will be available. And so this change is available right now, and we have this lying prime minister, probably going to turn out to be one of the worst prime ministers in the history of politics in Canada as a federation.
Well, yeah, but he's brought in, when you see his association with the United Nations, he has been brought in to fulfill the final stages of global governance and getting us into there. And this is why, if you're looking at the decolonization process and everything and all the research we've done, creating the Citizens Convention of Consent, other than the politicians say, okay, now you're all free and we're not going to have veto over you anymore, and we're going to make sure that you guys can sue us if we're incompetent. We might as well be dreaming here, because they'll never do that. So the only way that we can be assured is to sign the Citizens Convention of Consent on our websites, and they can do that online. It doesn't cost anything. But the Convention of Consent does is help Canadians to exercise their democratic right to remove the Queen in right of Canada and the provinces, to replace it with the people in right of Canada and the provinces, which should have been done in 1982 and in 1931, and to further instill a pure direct democracy system of governance and final decision-making authority, veto power by the people, making the courts and all levels of governance to be accountable to fiduciary obligations to the people.
Okay, so
this is our power, and we can do this worldwide.
And we have to do it because the clock is ticking. And it's interesting that the RCMP out of Toronto come to Vancouver to make this cannabis bust. I mean, that's just a small...
Well, wait. in global governance, because now, according to Trudeau, and why he can't allow the cannabis laws to come in, because now we are regulated under COP21, which is international law. And if people knew that Canadians are the ones who paid for the infrastructure and the laws for the international crimes courts, they'd be floored, because it's the BC lawyers and the Montreal lawyers that wrote all the laws for it. So they are pushing us into this global governance issue and control over us, and they're going to try to dangle carrots in front of our faces. They're going to have the politicians make all kinds of bogus promises to con the people, because the people want to be lazy and want a nanny instead. This is what they think, but I think that the people are more intelligent than that. They need to give the people the credit, and we can do this. We can do this as slow as we want to or as fast as we want to. But as long as the Convention of Consent is signed, they no longer have veto over us. They could no longer rule over us. We tell them what to do, including the courts. No laws anywhere in the world supersede the will of the 51% majority of the people in the country.
It has to be that way. Otherwise, it cannot even get close to claiming to be a democracy. And if people think that this issue is just kind of cooking along and it'll all work out in the end, you want to think of this North America Defense Authorization Act that was passed about 7 years ago, and it allows, amongst many, many other even more egregious conditions, it allows American military to arrest Canadian citizens on Canadian soil. When was any Canadian? When was any Canadian?
Not only that, Bob, one of the things we failed to mention, excuse me here, is the fact that under the NDAA, okay, that is actually the way that they look at it. It's the intercontinental security measures, okay, and this includes our police force and everything else. And if you look at the Black Ops and all of this, they have the right now, because Canada signed on to be with the United States in this terrorist, how do you call that, war on terror, and to be able for the United States and Canada to be together to defend Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And they have the right to go all over our continent at every whim they want. So if you're looking at the NDAA, this is a 1,500-page document. It's totally sickening. Canada is the whole document. And the thing is they rule now over us. Their military, their private military that they're allowing Blackwater to do, now corporations can hire private military in our countries. This has been done. This was done in Temiskaming, Quebec, at Tembec. This was done in New Brunswick. Right across Canada. We need to wake the hell up.
We do. I really appreciate the work that you and your crew have done. And I just want you to talk real briefly, because we've only got about 3 minutes. I'm seeing different nations are picking up this direct democracy in Europe and in other areas. What's going on?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is, we know that it's going to be hard to, get people to think straight here in Canada with 35 million people. But in other countries that are smaller, hopefully they'll pick this up. If you're looking at Ireland, they've got, a good 2 million pissed off people over there. Their total numbers are 4 million. It'd be easy for Ireland to pick this up, smaller countries to pick it up. These are all their rights, because they're all under the Commonwealth of Nations, and we're basically under the same laws. So basically, it doesn't matter what a queen or king or any laws stated before. Nothing supersedes the will of the people in law worldwide.
Nice. Well, it sounds like we have some firm ground to stand on.
Yeah, but we got to stick to it. People can't be wishy-washy and wanting to vote in some political party because of, they're making promises. People need to stand behind themselves and sign this Convention of Consent if they are true.
Okay, but that's a really, really heavy load you just delivered here, especially at the West Coast where we've got an election this year. So I'm going to just reflect it right back on you, sister, and ask you, what should a thinking, pro-democratic British Columbian be planning for this election?
Actually, if people, if you vote in that system, you are giving away your proxy to your voice.
I hear you.
I hear you.
But if you don't vote, you know what's going to happen.
It doesn't matter. Nothing's gonna change, Bob. It's only going to be another puppet replacing another puppet. Anyway, we've seen that for 150 years. How much more proof do people need?
So are you telling me then the only way out for us in this election is to sign the citizens' consent form? If by some miracle we could get 51% of BC people to sign this, the government, whoever they can go and pick whoever they'd want to represent their communities, whoever is coming up. You'd be better off with, independents who are going to be working for the people without final decision-making authority. But you need to remove final decision-making authority from these political parties. Otherwise, if you go and vote, you give away your proxy. So if you sign the Citizens' Convention of Consent and you go and vote, you just gave them back your power. That's the reality of things, and this is why we need to stick to only one thing and not be wishy-washy and go and vote for somebody and sign the Convention of Consent, because you're talking out of your mouth and out of your ass at the same time. I'm so sorry. That's all right. That's all right. But the point is that we're enabling a dysfunctional system. That's what you're driving at. And sooner or later, we have to either pay the piper or bite the bullet and move into some uncharted waters.
Because we're at the point where people need to either sign the convention and stand up and be the leaders they need to be, and not focus on somebody else being a leader, but themselves, or keep whining and enslave yourself.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because every time you vote, that's what you do.
All righty. Good one. Okay. Thanks again, Nicole. Good to talk to you, my dear.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and we'll talk later.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Nicole Lebrasseur of iAccuse.com, and on Facebook it is Democracy School, and let's see, also myfreedom2017.com on the internet. Thank you very much, Nicole, and your entire crew. It's a lot of work you're going through to make this happen, and I totally appreciate it. You're shedding valuable light on this. That brings us to the end of Altered Egos for this episode. My name is Bob Hansen. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. Remember that in April, first couple of weeks, we're going to have our fund drive. We're going to go out of Altered Egos with, again, Flying Down Thunder and Rise Ashen. And this tune is called Thunderstorm. Have yourselves a great week, people. Look after each other. Remember, resistance is creativity, and creativity is resistance. And don't take no wooden nickels. Next week. Bye-bye.
Hey,